And nowhere is that face more attractive than in Andalusia. This is the deep south of continental Europe. Andalusia, once the fabled Moorish land of Al-Andalus, which became the very soul and the spirit of all things Spanish.
Qué buena guitarra.
The sun, burning too bright on this tough, unforgiving terrain, has produced a volatile, powerful people and a culture to match. And those people have produced the most fanciful town in all Spain to be their capital, the glittering city of Sevilla. She is probably the vainest old girl in the old world, convinced that the rest of the world is envious of her extravagant charms. And today, as a newfound affluence has financed a facade lift and her preposterously pretty streets are dressed to kill, well, you almost believe her. For me, it says so much about Sevilla that its favourite son and daughter are Don Juan and Carmen, fiery, romantic, Baroque characters, just like this city itself. And this, which is now the university, is actually the tobacco factory where Carmen worked, rolling the cigars on her thighs and tempting her poor torero. It's in the tangled, hypnotic warren of the Barrio Santa Cruz, the whitewashed, one-time Jewish ghetto in this long-time Muslim city, that you most get the sense that the storybooks are still being written. And this is where Don Juan came many times a-courting. The fact that both of these characters are fictional says to me that Sevilla isn't so much a city as a romantic fantasy. No image is too corny here, no style too grandiose, and if something is understated, well, you should turn the volume up. Less, they say, means more, but not in this seriously over-the-top town. If you want to experience the highest of true Sevillana style, then this has to be the place. Probably, unfortunately, like me, you won't actually be able to afford to stay here. You could, though, always come and partake of just a sip of all this elegance. The splendour of the Alfonso XIII is a leftover from an international expo held in the city in 1929. They built a series of elaborate architectural confections which seem to have no purpose other than to look gratuitously ravishing. Then, of course, came the Civil War and the steady decline of 40 frozen years of Franco's rule. But today, Spain is the great success story of the continent, the coming country. Whenever Sevilla decides that it's in its glory, when it's really high-stepping, it spends its money on monuments and manners, on grace and style and charm and grand extravagant gestures. And I'm glad to say that they're doing it again. Expo 92. When Spain shows the world how well it's doing, so Sevilla has the grandest scheme of all. On the vast island of La Cartuja, £6,000 million has been invested in a dazzling futurescape dedicated to discovery and achievement. Discover Sevilla and see how much she's achieved. Expo sums up the relationship between the old and the new in Spain today. The ancient traditions are being cherished, made afresh, but the future's also being celebrated. It's being constructed here and now. Some haughty Hispanophiles are moaning about what Expo could do to their precious, fragile Sevilla. But I think it's precisely this kind of daring, this kind of scope of vision which made Sevilla such a great city in the first place. And I honestly believe that when the world looks back in 50 years' time, they'll say that all of this has made it even greater. In 6 months from April, 18 million people will walk among the 350,000 plants and watch 55,000 performances by 10,000 artists until 4 o'clock every morning. Even Antonio Quijano speaks 5 languages.
I think Expo is a perfect symbol of a new Spain that is emerging. A young country that cherishes its traditions, but still plunges into the new times. And I think this is a perfect symbol for that, because just across the river we have an ancient and beautiful city, and here we're building something that definitely belongs to the 21st century.
It seems like you're spending an awful lot of money and an awful lot of work for just 6 months of fun.
It is, but it's not only 6 months of fun. After those 6 months are over, what stays? What is the legacy of this expo? The legacy is an area, a region that was very poor in the past and is now getting all these new infrastructure in bridges, roads, railways, airports and so on. And this is what civilians, what Andalusians will see in the future. So in a few years' time, when you look back, you probably won't remember the fancy pavilions that were here some years ago. But as you're taking the high-speed train to Madrid, you'll remember this is here because of that expo.
And the heart of that expo is here at the monastery where Columbus was first buried to celebrate the 500th anniversary of the voyage of discovery. But Columbus is also being exorcised. Spaniards are now so confident about the future that they can lay the distant past to rest. But they are also weaving their ancient traditions into this shiny new Spain. So every Sunday for 6 months, the organisers of Expo 92 will be sponsoring a special event on the other side of the river in a place called the Maestranza, the high cathedral of the corrida. The corrida is the most ancient, the most fundamental Andalusian cultural form of them all. Expo are backing what we clumsily call the bullfight. Sevilla has produced many of the greatest toreros, the men who walk the golden arena with the bulls. Curro Camacho used to do just that. As a young man, he dedicated his life to the strange, bloody and compelling ritual which is such a powerful part of the life of these people. Today he runs a small bar decked in mementos, but is still fired by afición, the passion for the bulls. The poet Lorca called the corrida the last serious thing in the modern world, and as the world gets more modern, so the corrida gets more serious. What it represents to me, and I believe to many people in Spain, is men's eternal struggle against nature. Nature here is hard, so it's represented by a beautiful champion, a noble, swift beast, the bull. A man in a suit of lights and a pair of pink stockings has to go out and create dominion over this animal. And then together, just maybe, they may create something beautiful, something that could even be called art. And Joaquim Diaz, a 17-year-old from nearby Utrera, is just embarking on the difficult and dangerous journey to try and master that art. He's a noviero, a trainee matador who faces smaller bulls until one day, maybe he can join the exalted few. The precise and solemn ritual of being helped into that suit of lights, which marks out those who take part in the national fiesta, occurs in a hotel room before he faces his test in the Great Maestranza. Even at this small, local event, the Queen Mother came down from Madrid to see the Andalusian boy try. If all of this sounds impossibly romantic, it's because it is. And still, thankfully, so is this Spain. But when darkness comes, their passions lighten and they parade for all to see. They fill the twisting streets to shop with a fervour and to stop and gossip and gaze and to eat delicious pastries, just as rich and fancy as their architecture. All Spaniards feel at home at night, except home is where none of them seem to be. That hum you can hear is the sound of pleasure. This is Friday night and it's now about 1 o'clock and it's just beginning to hot up. We're about 200 yards, I'd guess, from their equivalent of St. Paul's. Can you imagine that in London? Sevilla is a young, hip and happening city, going about its pleasure with a quite remarkable exuberance. This is the face of the new Andalusia. The flavour of this place, the dry, pungent taste of a land that's too hot, too hard, too ungiving, is summed up for me by a white wine. I believe it's one of the great wines of the world, and they call it Fino de Jerez. Salute. Fino is the taste of this land and also its pride, drunk ice cold and everywhere. We may think of sherry as a drink for vicars and maiden aunts, but here it is positively fashionable. But Jerez is not only a drink, it is also a beautiful, straight-backed, aristocratic town, which is now just an hour from Sevilla on the new motorway system. Along with the wine of the region, Jerez now also has the song. 4 years ago, a derelict palace in the old part of town was restored and converted into the home of the music of the lowest of the low. 20 years ago, people were predicting that flamenco, the song and dance of the gitanos, the gypsies of Andalusia, was about to become extinct. Today, this irrepressible, unstoppable music captures the spirit of these vivacious people. Flamenco has become the soundtrack for the new Spain. Maria, what does flamenco actually mean to you?
To me, it's a way of life. It's a way of expressing everyday living, everyday emotions.
Why do you think it's become so much more popular in the last few years?
I think it has to do a lot with the fact that there's a lot of spirit in flamenco music. It's truly an art form. I see it more like an art form than just a folk art. It's really you know what it is? It's the mystery of flamenco.
Great.
A little dose of flamenco and you're flying high.
Maria Bermudez dances for a living for the tourists in Sevilla, but many of the kids who dance and sing and play at the Fundación are not professionals, but living proof that flamenco is still a vital, vibrant part of the popular culture, of the everyday existence. You can hear those rhythms on the radio and on the streets. See those steps in nightclubs as young and old dance together. Not split apart by any apartheid of the ages, but joined by a love of this music. You can almost feel that stirring spirit in the burning southern air. But it's back in Sevilla, in the famed gypsy barrio, the home of the greatest toreros and flamenqueros, that I really feel the spirit. It's been gentrified now, polished up like so much of this town and this Andalusia. But for me, it's been made even better for it, because it's retained its powerful, magnetic character. Here, more than anywhere else, I feel part of my Spain. By the banks of the Guadalquivir, the great river, as it runs through Sevilla, my favourite city. I feel part of all of those pasts. But even more, I feel that I'm participating not just in a good present, but an absolutely splendid future. This, more than anything else, will keep pulling me back. I'll be back. And those 18 million people going to the expo will swamp the city. So if you want to see a quieter side of Sevilla, go before April. You can fly there from Gatwick for £89, or from Manchester using Gibraltar for just £10 more. There's also some really attractive inclusive trips which take in Spain's other great cities of '92. That's Barcelona and Madrid. And you can spend time in any two, or indeed all three. But book now. Another now or never city is one which is currently in the news, Maastricht in Holland. Lansdowne Holidays are asking us to follow in the footsteps of John Major. I hope I don't have to wear his shoes, and grey suits are definitely optional. A 2-night break is just 425 ECUs. That's £299 in old money. Tourist boards the world over are trying to separate you from your money, whatever form you keep it in. To do so, they employ all manner of gimmicks and images, and no one does it better than a country which Susan Marlin has just visited.
At first glance, Edinburgh, all dignity and Georgian classicism, looks as it did to tourists 100 years ago. But look more closely.